Today is Wednesday, and on Monday I went to a workshop with GILL, fascia guy. Really amazing. It was a presentation of his work on anatomy and the way he understood fascia, but then it got far more complicated, and he started to essentially weave in this understanding, what you might call the psychosomatic embodiment of what he had been studying, like the way that he felt and understood the world because of the things he had experienced. And it ended like saying that everything is one thing, and he was showing photos of fascia against photos of waterfalls, and like it was like, I see my body everywhere, and all these things, and similar things that I hear Rumi say, I think. I mean, in the sense that GILL's words are really rooted in the sort of structure of the world, right? Like he's looking at anatomy, he's looking at these very real things like adhesions of fascia and movement of healthy fascia and strength of fascia and strength of muscle and all these different things, and how it creates this system that is intimately connected, almost as much by fluid as it is by more solid structure. And he paints a picture of a landscape and an understanding of the world that is beautiful. And it, in my feeling of it, in my experience of being there in the room with him, it permeates the room. And it's, I mean, it almost felt like being at church. He was up there talking about the body. And I mean, in some sense, he even says that the body is a sacred book, and this is what he's been devoted to reading. So I want to explore some fascia stuff today, and I wrote the joints of my feet. I'm going to get there, I think, but I'm thinking more up here first. But I want to start with some Rumi. I'm not going to read all Rumi today, but I'm going to think about fascia and yeah, I guess I'll read this one. I don't know. Yeah. Coleman Barks calls this one No Flag. I used to want buyers for my words. Now I wish someone would buy me away from words. I've made a lot of charmingly profound images, scenes with Abraham and Abraham's father Azar, who was also famous for icons. I'm so tired of what I've been doing. Then one image without form came, and I quit. Look for someone else to tend the shop. I'm out of the image-making business. Finally, I know the freedom of madness. A random image arrives. I scream, "Get out!" It disintegrates. Only love. Only the holder the flag fits into, and wind. No flag. Banners, definitions. Love. So I'm touching my rib cage, and in this workshop I saw a lot of images that I guess I could look online and find. GILL's got some of his dissection videos, human dissection videos, available on YouTube. I've never really gotten up the gut to watch them, but GILL is really, he's really amazing in the way that he is able to unite the profane and the profound. He's, like I say, he's looking at these physical structures, but you have the real sense of a person with a spiritual life, and it doesn't feel dehumanizing. He talks a lot about the gratitude he has for the people who gave their bodies in these processes. And so I'm feeling, though, into some of the images that he showed. I'm trying to feel them. And he showed these pictures of fascia and how there are just layers and layers of it. Like there's you know, there's basically 3 layers in terms of how people normally think about it, but he showed that it's just, I mean, it's layer after layer after layer after layer, and he's just like looking at this with a scalpel basically, and he's like, look, these poor tools, and I can show you, you know, 4 layers right here, and that's just like this one little aspect, right? And so it's in some sense easy to see that his workshop is titled What the Fuzz, and as he separates pieces of the fascia, what happens is there's this like intricate network, very much like a root system, that looks like, as he says, like fuzz or cotton candy, but you can tell that it's these like structures that are all interlaced, right? And you see it as he's pulling it away, and then it isn't what it is anymore, which GILL says that. He's like, I can't see what something is with the knife. I can only destroy what it is. But by doing that, I can then infer what it is. I find that to be a really, really humble take. I hope that I find that humility. So, what is it? You know, like, what is it? There's these layers, and he's showing like open joints and things moving, and you can see how these multiple layers just slide against one another with just impeccable smoothness, right? And there's just like these layers of like kind of fatty globular tissue, and then there's these like layers of flat like strand, like almost like, if you imagine like tape, but like thicker, and but there's all these layers in each of these things, right? And they're all sliding, and yet when you separate them, they're all like, there's this interconnection that you can't even tell what it is, but you can only see it as it's pulling apart. But when I imagine it like, you know, like a root system, as though like the fibers of fascia are very much kind of growing this way, but they're also growing this way, and they're also growing this way, and they're interlocking, and they're moving, and this is how I imagine it. And yet you would think that that wouldn't create movement, and then somehow they're sliding with impeccable slipperiness, right? That's what's so amazing to see, is the way that the pieces slide like this. And well, I'll get there, but so somehow I imagine it as these like root systems of fibers that are completely interpenetrating, that almost become quantum in some sense, because we would think of, you know, a penetration or a root system as not moving, but then somehow it seems like that actually creates the possibility of movement. So I say quantum in the sense of particle or wave, like, which is it? I mean, it's probably too gross a level to really call it quantum, but in some way I wonder, like, I'm just looking at it and I'm like, what is this? And this experience that GILL seems to have undergone through the means of his life, through what he's done. I mean, who knows? I don't know what GILL was like before, but he's very sort of exuberant and in it and living and breathing this philosophy, which he seems to be reading essentially from bodies. So I'm imagining the layers, right? And the thing is, the layers they're around the muscles, and they're under the skin, and they're inside the muscles, and they're around the organs, and they're like around the lungs and inside the rib cage, and all these things. It's just completely surrounding. And he says that the fascia, he demonstrates, right? He's holding like fascia. He's like pulled fascia off body, right? And he's holding it, and he's got like 50 pounds. It's just like hanging there. He's like, yeah, I could do 100, but I couldn't lift that much. Now, if I did this with a muscle with even like 5 pounds, it would just fall to pieces, right? So there's some way that the fascia is providing the strength, and the muscles are perhaps like the motor. It's hard to say exactly how that would work, right? But also to remember that it's all one system. And this is where I need to get more into the embryology. But it's all one system, and it's growing together. It's not like I took a muscle and I took a fascia and I did this and I had a hamburger, right? No, it's like they have formed together. So it's this symbiotic thing. And we call things muscles, we call things fascia, but only by way of the blade. Right? Before that, we are just organism. Right? So there's this connective tissue, and it's running like to the depths around your muscles, around your organs, through, right? It's like liver, stomach, intestines, right? Pelvic floor, all this musculature, and there's just everything is basically making it so that whereas we might think of our body as like solid structure, it's actually far closer to fluid structure. You know, it's like there are fluids that are actually radiating through, and the movement of the fluid, much like a water wheel or a river that's flowing and like moving things through it, you know, like like I'm imagining trees that have been harvested and put in the river, and the trees are floating down the river, and the river is just moving, right? And that to me is somehow like connective tissue and bone is connective tissue, right? So it gets hard because we want to say this is bone and this is that and this is that, but everything, not everything, but a lot of this stuff is essentially connective tissue. But you know, we can talk about fascia as perhaps being something that's softer or more slippery, and we can talk about ligaments as having like maybe more pull, maybe not even than the fascia, and we can talk about bones as being more rigid and being able to direct force very efficiently, right? Like a bone. But in some sense, we can imagine, just like those logs in the river, the log is being carried by the fluid flow. We can imagine that the body is a fluid flow, that the body itself is a fluid flow. And it's very different, I think, than I've thought about it in the past. I've often thought like the body is stacked, right? I mean, in general, in terms of movement trends and the images I see teachers using, in general, I would say from my perspective, movement education is moving more towards the fluid idea and more away from the stacking idea. You see like Ida Rolf used that classic image of like, you know, the bones should be stacked, right? And Mabel Todd, but then you get into like Emily Conrad and they're not talking about stacking at all, they're talking about fluid motion. And a lot of the people that I've kind of read about or studied talk about this idea of motion, and Victor and Angela, and a lot of people talk about fascia now, and GILL is basically showing, look, fascia is like this fluid system. So I think without going much more in depth about that, because there's way more I need to study about that, I'm just going to start imagining that my body is fluid. And I'm putting my hands on my low back just because that part feels rigid right now and tight. And I'm going to imagine and see if I can soften and feel the fluid flow in between the bones, around the bones, in the muscles, actually making the muscles move, imagining the muscle fibers themselves as like the trees or perhaps the vines that have fallen into that river of connective tissue, and they somehow have, you know, whatever it is, the proteins or whatever that make them move, but without all this connective tissue surrounding it, they can't move anything, right? And the bones, we think of them as so structural, but imagine now how they're floating in that river, right? And maybe the process of moving is more like sitting on that log. If you could balance on that log and or imagine it as a canoe and steering in the water, right? And maybe the muscles are just that tiny little steer, but the connective tissue is the river that actually takes the boat where it's going. And then the boat itself would be the bones, right? And the bone is just like, whoom, and it's shifting, and it's able to use all the flow of forces to guide and direct some form of movement. But then what, of course, is the boatman in that image? I don't know. I'll just let this one go and pretend that I'm the boatman, whatever that means. So I'm feeling rivers of fluid, and I really want to imagine now that the whole universe is fluid, and that the air around me, which is a fluid, right, is all connected in this movement. Remember, because it's the air pressure that keeps me here. If I were in space, I would just, like, there would be nothing holding me together, because I am in balance with the weight of the air. So, in a very real sense, we are fluid systems moving in fluid. Who is to say that there is truly separation? Right? You see how something like this, which I'm just looking and feeling my body, and I'm looking at theories of physics or science or anatomy and or understandings of those things, and then you quickly see how it could easily become like an ecological philosophy, right? Like, because if we are truly related, and if we can feel that in our experience to the things around us, like literally I move the fluid and the fluid moves, and then they're like, who knows, static charges and whatever it is between and created by all that fluid, right? As though the fluid itself were its own form of bone, right? You can imagine there's all these forces in the world that, like, we don't understand. Perfectly frank, we don't understand. And the arguments and work of people like Gil Hedley or Rumi or all these people make me believe that it's actually all far more connected than not. And once again, it's a paradigm. It's just a paradigm. One that probably won't be useful eventually. But it seems useful to me now. So I'm kind of getting away from, I'm getting more back into the stacking feeling. I want to get into the softness feeling. So I'm just feeling my SI joints, my pelvic halves as they do this. Feeling my legs connected. And then I'm feeling like that softness of fluid flow as each leg goes forward and back. As though it's moving around the bones, washing the bones to move the bones, right? And then imagining the bones themselves as simply being a much slower fluid flow. Like, if the fascia were swinging like this, I can imagine the bones were swinging like this, and the fascia is going June, 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 and the bone is like June, and it's like got a twist in it, right? Because it's really what's happening. It's like these really slow movements of the bone, and then somehow through the orchestration of the movement, the fluid movements inside the bone that occur as the bone's growing, right? The bone is literally moving and growing, literally. The trabeculi, they're shaping, and all this is in relation to the much quicker moving connective tissue, muscles, organs around it, and that somehow through that interchange, right? It's almost like if they were octaves, like this would be a really high octave, this would be a really low octave, but if they're both E's, you can feel that resonance or whatever, and it's almost like somehow through that movement occurs. It's weird imagery today, but fascia's weird. It's not even that weird. It makes total sense. That's the other really interesting part. It's like we are fluid creatures. We are fluid creatures. You hold a baby. Babies are soft. They're fluid creatures. I think a lot of times for me, I think of my identity often as the parts of me that are hard, like the stiff, rigid parts, like this is me or something. It's like, well, what is me? Is it the movements I like? Is it the movements I don't like? Is it my feelings? Is it my anatomy? Is it the actions I do? Is it the words I speak? Is it the care or thought I have? Oh. So now I'm going to imagine the spine from head to tail, right? So I've got this kind of fluid flow and my legs feeling going on, and now I'm going to imagine sending that up and through the torso. So right, at first I imagine spine, but I'm also going to start imagining organs, right? Spine gives me a much more like sort of movement, and organs kind of softens it out. And the organs I can really feel, like I was saying about the bones, I can really feel how when I turn, this would be like the rib cage or outside of my body, that the organs are a little bit behind and then they're a little bit behind. Like if I'm soft, I can really feel that. So it makes sense that the bones could do the same thing. And then just from that perspective, I can start to notice, where do things stick? So where does it stop going like this, right? And it start going like really rigid sticking. And this is the thing that GILL really brought up was, hey look, the fascia's growing adhesions all over the place. And this is what Bonnie says. Bonnie's like, look, there are adhesions in your lung and you can release them if you feel them and you be with them and you have the intent. And GILL's like, yeah, the same thing, like these things stick. He doesn't talk about releasing them per se. He does from a body worker perspective, but he doesn't even think releasing them. I don't fully understand his talk about that, so I won't even talk about that. But Bonnie talks about releasing the adhesions, and when you look at her body, it very much appears like she has succeeded in doing this because something is very different about her movement. So I'm just kind of still rotating and trying to find that fluid flow up through my chest, heart, lung area, my ribs. Like, could all my ribs like move a little different? Like, could I even feel that? Like, for me right now, that feels like, wow, that feels like, would I ever be able to feel that? But actually a part of me believes that I really could if I really can get there, but that it is possible to. So there you see I start to move like the whole thing kind of as one, right? That's what I'm trying to essentially shake out or feel my way into in terms of finding it through the momentum. Don't lose my legs. I did start talking about my feet, so I'm going to just let my arms and shoulders swing here, working to feel the fascia. Now I'm getting this rotation, and I can feel like the transverse colon basically moving against the diaphragm. Can I feel the liver freely moving? Start to get a little bit of a cramp as I get into that area. I'm continuing to try to feel this soften, not get over tight or push it, and not push my body too far, right? Like, because there's like a little bit of a stitch and I can feel it. It's kind of like moving. So just kind of feel that. Relaxing, just feeling my sit bones right now as I work to really just let that muscle, it's kind of like, let it re-find its fluidity. I can imagine it literally as an adhesion, but one that's perfectly intelligent, right? And that's the other thing is we think about, well, adhesions, it's like something that's stuck or gummy. It's like gum on a table, right? Like, oh, I gotta scrape it off. But I actually think it's all perfectly intelligent and that we can be in touch with it. And then it could theoretically, I've talked about this in the past, just release. And so I focus on my grounding. So can I feel the fluid flow from head to sit bones, right? And I can feel how I get kind of rigid. I'm kind of like doing it. And so, okay, well, I'm imagining the imagery I saw in his workshop of the fascia sliding, and I'm imagining that just kind of all around at different layers and levels and thicknesses and firmnesses, and all of it's just like relating through a fluid flow. Now I'm finding my tailbone. And I'm finding my feet. Now I'm really feeling and going through the imagery of all the joints of my foot, right? Because I've taken time to feel that and work on that. I can feel the subtalar joint. I can feel the fibula and the talus. Or rather the fibula and the tibia holding the talus. Feel the head of the talus, the navicular, and the talus resting on the heel bone. What's it called? What's that bone called? Calcaneus. And then the calcaneus and the cuboid, which is always such an interesting bone for me. It's an interesting feeling. And that relationship between the navicular and the cuboid that are sort of on this diagonal or bias angle in this plane. And that rounded front of both the talar head but also the navicular into the cuneiforms, right? There's these three cuneiforms that kind of rest together almost like their own little arch. They've got these, they're like 1, 2, and 3. And then the cuneiforms connected to that navicular straight into the talar head go straight into the 3 metatarsals. So those are the 3 rays, the big toe, second toe, and third toe. Those are connecting all up into the navicular, into the talar head, which is into the talus. So you have, this is what some of my teachers call the ankle foot. It's the first 3 toes, big toe, second toe, third toe, into, you know, all the little phalanges of the toes. Just feel that phalanges, they can all move. There's a lot of joints in the foot. And this goes into the 3 metatarsals, and they run the length. That first one's like kind of big and thick, you can feel it. The second one, the third one, both are smaller, thinner and longer. You feel them move, and then at the proximal ends of the metatarsals, that's where the cuneiforms are, those 3 sort of arched bones. And then they rest into the navicular, which has this concavity, rather convexity, and the cuneiforms are concave, and so it fits like this. And then the talus, or the head of the talus, is the same angle of concavity and convexity. So you have this double joint thing, and the navicular is in the center, cuneiforms, right? And the talus is literally sort of the ankle bone. Some people just call it the ankle bone, but that's pretty imprecise. But it's resting on the top of your foot. And this is where your shin bone rests. It's sitting on top of the talus. Right? So if I feel my knees and I trace my shin bone down, that's right in there. Just below my fingers is the talus. And then the fibula also rests on the talus, but it's just kind of on the outside. And you can feel it's kind of hanging off a little bit, like you touch and you can feel pretty much the bottom of the fibula. I'm sure not everyone can feel that, but I can feel that on my body. And so they're sort of like the tibia is kind of wide on the base, and the fibula is kind of like this. So it's kind of like that and like that, something like that, right? Like that and like that. And those are resting on the talus, and then the talus is resting on the calcaneus, the heel bone, basically directly on top of it. So you imagine now that the weight pathways of the tibia are going straight down, resting onto this domed surface of the talus, dropping down through the talus onto the calcaneus. And the calcaneus has these, I have to actually double check the angles, it's been a while since I visualized this, but it has this biconcave joint. So most joints are like this, right? But the calcaneus, or the subtalar joint, the calcaneus talar joint, it's kind of like this, and it's kind of at an angle, and that's what I can't remember. I can't remember which way is up and down and which angle it is, but I look those up later. But basically that's just enough info for right now. So it's sitting there, and it's got this sort of like rotating kind of effect like this. Right? It's kind of on the heel bone, the ankle bone on the heel bone. And then the heel bone, so it's receiving the weight from above, and then it's kind of radiating it. If you look at the trabeculi, you can see kind of how it radiates and makes it work. And then it's sending the weight forward. So it's sending the weight down into the earth, but it's also sending the weight forward, and that's like a little bit on the outside of the foot. And right in front of that, where it's sending the weight, is the cuboid. That's that cool little bone I like. So we had the talus up here into the heel bone, and then the heel bone radiates forward into the cuboid. But the head of the talus, it kind of curves off towards the center line, rests into the navicular, which goes into the three toes basically. So you have the navicular up here and the cuboid down here, and then there is some relationship here. But it's the cuboid I really like, and you can feel where that is if you feel down your fifth toe into that groove. That's the cuboid. Down the fifth toe, it's the end of the fifth metatarsal into the cuboid. And you like move your foot and see if that moves. Right? Imagine connective tissue and fascia and muscles all around that. Also, all these river flows, the softness, all this is happening all through the joints of your foot. Right? So the cuboid then radiates the weight into the fourth and fifth toe in metatarsal, right? The fourth and fifth ray. So this here now is the heel, cuboid, fourth and fifth toe. That's what people call the heel foot. So you have the ankle foot and the heel foot. One goes to the ankle bone, one goes to the heel bone. And then they sort of form this, it's hard to say, right? Because it's all fluid flow, but some people have proposed a theory that it's like this figure 8 pathway through the foot, which kind of makes sense if you think about pronation and supination as a spiralic action of the foot. But all that's more than I think we're going to talk about today. So I'm imagining, I'm touching the cuboid, and I'm imagining that river flow in the joints of my foot. Right, there's fascia here, there's smoothness and sliding in that weird, like cotton candy root system, which somehow connects everything, makes for a total fluid connection between all the parts. And also, this is what GILL calls differentiated movement, that all the layers can move in differentiated ways. That's this turning and feeling the parts all move in separate ways. But that goes through all the layers of the fascia and the muscles. Everything is moving in this differentiated way. And all the movement is essentially balancing itself. So I'm moving that foot, moving my toes. Feeling the heads of my metatarsals down into the earth. Like, can I feel as I raise my heels the actual change of relationship of those bones into the ground, right? Can I feel the changing relationship of the toes? I really want to hear a song. I think that, I'm just going to play it off YouTube. I think that they'll just put ads on the video and I just won't get the money. Which is like, okay, because the song is good. Oh man, but who was it? Ed Sheeran and... Ava? No. Eva? No. What was it called? Was this it? Rita Ora. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Ed Sheeran.
I'm Rita.
There we go. That's what I want.
This is yours.
Okay. And I'm going to put my chat on.
And I'm Rita Ora.
Got it right that time?
Yep.
Anyway, we are going to sing your song. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Hey. I woke up with a fear this morning, but I can taste you on the tip of my tongue.
So can I feel literally, it's like the static charge of the ground connecting through the fluids of my body to allow me to find this connected, relaxed state.
We were way up, kissing in the back of the cab, and then you say, love, baby, let's go back to my flat. And when we wake
I'm totally in the wrong account. That's what's going on.
I don't wanna hear sad songs anymore. I only wanna hear love songs. I found my heart up in this place tonight.
I'm feeling that fluid flow. My shoulders, my trapezius. It's literally fluids. What does it take to release into the fluid flow of our body? What does that mean? What would it mean? Like, what sort of psychological, emotional, spiritual transformations do we undergo to actually embody our own fluid systems? There we go, that's what I was looking for. I'm on the chat now. Alright. So I'm rocking the pelvis, letting that motion carry up through the body. Feeling my organs, my lungs and my heart. Feeling my intestines. Now I'm looking at myself on the computer. Feeling my liver. Feeling my gallbladder. As though the little gallbladder is balancing the big mass of the liver above it, just like doo-doo-doo-doo. What does it feel like to feel my gallbladder? Feeling the bones of my ribs related to the gallbladder. Feeling the kidneys. Ha! Feeling the kidneys. Feeling the heart. Whew. Feeling the kidneys. Just gonna keep listening to this song because straight up I want to. The gallbladder, the kidneys. Can I find a sense of the ureters, right? So the ureters are the tubes connecting the kidneys to the bladder. I find my bladder. I feel my pubic bone, right? I've talked about that in other videos. It's a connection between the two pelvic halves. I feel that as a fluid flow with fascia between, right? Like essentially connective tissue. It's like cartilage and stuff, I think. But I can't imagine if you didn't bring it down, you wouldn't find layers of fluid connection. So then, can I feel like the slow, viscous, moving flow? I mean, this is imaginative, right? But it's like, it is there in some sense. It feels less like movement than it does like an emanation, which is also movement, but it doesn't feel like a physical, perceived external movement that the camera could pick up or that I could even feel per se, but then this sort of radiation of the bone, like the marrow, the blood vessels inside the bone, all this stuff has to be free to move. So imagine the blood vessels of my pelvic halves, like in their little channel. It's just like, here we go. We are heart. Right? We are heart. Bonnie and Gill both say the same thing, right? It's like the heart is not this thing. The heart is this thing that's flowing to every part of your body, continually pumping. Right? So now I'm picturing myself as a full skeleton with blood flow and all the blood vessels interpenetrating the bones, refreshing them, filling them, flowing back to the heart. Right? Where does movement originate? Where does movement initiate? I'm feeling my brain, my eyes, brain stem, spinal cord, nerve roots. Going back to rocking my pelvis. Thinking about a fluid flow. thinking about a fluid flow. This is somehow the nature of reality, down to fluids, right? And then we go down to quantum and it's like, what is it? I don't even know. It's just particles that move where we see them or something. And so how do we take different models and apply them to our felt understanding of the body? So now I'm doing this rolling with my chest, and I'm imagining that going into the pump part of the heart. And imagine that pump pumping blood all throughout my body, up into my head and brain, all through the bones, the muscles, the organs. Just let the emanation of the music move my body, reminding my body of its fluid state, of this permeability which underlies the initial perception of its physicality, or not physicality, but it doesn't look very fluid, right? It doesn't often feel very fluid. But then, once again, go back to the baby. The baby's fluid. Baby's fluid. I'm not saying we should all be babies or have baby bodies. But I am saying, look at this like the closest thing we can see to an unaffected human by its environment. Of course, that's never true, right? But they haven't gone through the socialization process, which is so deeply connected to our embodiment. You see, and they're soft, right? It's like cats. Cats are soft. Babies are soft. So I'm looking for softness. So I'm going to go to the ligaments, cartilage in my knee, synovial fluid in my knee, capsule. There's all fascial connection, right? And all that is sliding, and all the fluids are sliding, and the bone and the cartilage, the ligaments. Just imagining what is solid in my body as a slower flow. Feeling my feet, just the connection of my feet on the ground. Feeling those bones. I'm just swinging my chest. Fluids, easy connection. I mean, what am I doing on this show? If you can figure that out better than I can, you can probably name it. I'm feeling the reverberation of these taps on my leg, feeling it travel through the leg. So I'm putting my focus on the musculature of the inner thigh as I slap the outer thigh, and the inner calf as I slap the outer calf, and the bones of the foot, the inside bones of the foot, the outside bones of the foot, right? What is the relation of all the parts, right? What if I tap here? What's the relation in my talus? What's the relation between my heel, the ball of my foot, and the floor? My thigh, my butt, right? I'm tapping here. How do I feel it in my butt? How do I feel it in my head? Because it's bouncing down on the butt, the floor, and then it's going up the spine, right? It's going. And then if I relax enough, I can probably feel the reverberation going this way and then coming back down. Am I in love? Song's got me feeling all right. That's a different feel right there. Sit bones, can I relax the sit bones? Can I yield the sit bones, Bonnie says. Feeling the spine, Feeling my organs. And then I find that flow reverberating back down. Changed my sense of my posture. It actually helps the lift of my head and my spine feel like more rooted somehow. I feel like I'm finding the rhythm that goes up and then comes down. Think about the work of, what's his name? The Japanese guy who thinks stuff around water crystals. Like thinks love and like the crystals take on specific shapes. It's crazy, and he photographs them. He does like distilled water and then he thinks and he shows you the difference. Whoa. You know, so you literally think about that. I mean, it gets pretty woo, right? But at the same time, hey, why not? It's a model. You think about what it would be like to affect all the fluids in your system, which is your whole system. Different fluids in different ways and different viscosities, but all fluids. And to think what into them, right? What are you thinking into your fluid systems? How are you viewing your body? I'm gonna go back to the kidneys because I had that reaction when I first felt them. Like, ooh. I'm just gonna swing and rock my kidneys. Imagining the kidneys themselves moving maybe a little different with the blood flow going into them, right, and coming out of them. Imagining the tissue of the kidney actually softening and moving and reverberating these flows. So we have all these different layers. Imagining the fascia that's around it and keeping it in its place and allowing it to slide with the structures around it. They're essentially pockets of fascia that like things grow in, they can move against one another. I mean, fascia would appear to be one of the strongest things in the body. So you can very much say our structure is defined by it. And that's one of GILL's points. The fascia is closer, forms a more closer 3D representation of the physical dimensions of the body than any other body system. Nervous system, skeletal, like skeletal's all holes, right? But like you might think like circulatory, like the heart, right? You see the heart and it just fills the body, but the fascia fills it even more densely. So in some sense, perhaps all our strength, everything we're doing, even by standing, is somehow perhaps through the fascia. I mean, maybe it really is more apt to think of us as standing rivers as opposed to standing log houses that are moved by internalized rivers, but that were actually river. I use that image. What is it like to release into being river? I'm feeling my butt just like rest into this chair. What is it to be river? Going back to the kidneys. Finding 12th rib, 11th rib, kidneys. Feeling for the joint between the 11th and 12th rib and the, T, I guess it'd be, I don't know if the 12th rib is between L1 and T12 or T12 and T11 and the other one's up, but imagine I feel that area, and these moving ribs swinging against the transverse process, right? Swinging in this joint, in the vertebrae. and imagine that fluid connection. What am I thinking? Like, how is that fluid related to my thought structure? Starting to work my way up the spine and the ribs. That synovial fluid, what is it radiating? What is it thinking? What is it crystallized with? How does your fluid flow? Okay. Finding that like gentle sort of extension, rock in the pelvis, just like that, or not in the spine rather. I'm driving it from the pelvis. My whole spine is going a little like this, a little like this. See if I can soften that into just a fluid continuum. And the diaphragm is fluid. I often think of the diaphragm as this kind of tight thing. Maybe it's because mine is. Softening the diaphragm is a fluid flow over the liver. Yeah.
Right that time. Yep. We are going to see. You're so good. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Kidneys and liver, kidneys and liver. Seeing the curve of the diaphragm, so the diaphragm's like this umbrella, kind of weird umbrella. Kind of comes off the front like this and it's kind of like doubled. And it goes down, it connects down to T12 where we're at that 12th rib, little short guy. But that's just what the books say, right? Bonnie says the crura actually go further, which if you look at the work of GILL, of course it makes sense. Like separations are just the anatomist. Like anatomy is just the separations. Separations are just the anatomist's approximations of what's going on, right? The anatomist separations are approximations. Negative definitions are destructions, right? So it's easy, actually, to imagine the crura, these lines of these muscle fibers continuing down that connective tissue all the way down to the tailbone. And it's like feeling for the tip of the tailbone, which if I'm sitting up on my sit bones and not like rocking back, it should be free. It's actually swinging free. Can I feel the muscle and skin moving between it, that liquid fascial connection? It really brings my awareness to the SI joints, the movement in the SI joints. And I imagine now that the diaphragm is that radiating fluid flow from the swing of the tailbone up, curling through the center of my body, around the liver, around the stomach, past the kidneys, past the intestines, and then just it's curling under the lungs, the heart. And it's connecting to the ribs, all around the bottom of the ribs. It's doming up in there. Right? You've got this fluid flow that, like, how is the system functioning? Can anyone really say? Finding the 4 quadrants of the pelvis that Bonnie lays out, tailbone to pubic bone, sit bone to sit bone, noticing the spatial relationships between them. Are they even? Can I make them even? Can I move them all independently, right? Like, this results in very weird movements, right? If I let go of the quadrant and I just think about, the pelvic floor as this complex layered system with all the fascial movements, right? And it comes up into the that muscle, it's right here. Yeah, right? The iliopsoas, the iliacus? Is it the no. What? Iliacus, is that? No. Is it? Can't remember. Anyways, this muscle here, right, connects down, and the psoas, right? All these fibers are continuous, right? And into pelvic floor, and up into the muscles of the spine, the abdominals, right? All this stuff, it's continuous. It's flowing up and through. So I'm feeling now, like, think about the direct lines between like the tailbone and the pubic bone, around past the genitals, even the genitals themselves, right? And the different shapes they take. Into the abdominal muscles, layers of abdominal muscles, right? Like different fibers and directions. And all that into the bones. But we also have the bones of the ribs connecting from the diaphragm. So we get that inner and the outer. We have layers of fascia inside surrounding the lungs, multiple layers that slide against one another with fluid between. They come into the different lobes of the lung, and the lobes of the lung are sliding against one another. Really sliding against the ribs. I mean, moving, like they're really moving. Like this is, it's happening. These actions are just taking the body and they're moving. These are your breaths. These are your movements, right? And I'm initiating like the turn from the upper lobe of the lung, the middle lobe of the lung, the bottom lobe of the lung. Shoo. Differentiated movement, spirillic action in 3 dimensions. Right? These are the things that create deeper, more like connected and elegant movement. This is how people radiate power. Right? It's not just muscles. The other lobe, probably, most likely I have 2, I don't know. Some people have 3, but most people have 2 because you have the heart more over here. So initiating from that upper lobe, that lower lobe. Now feeling all 5, 6, whatever, however many lobes you have, swinging in relation, and they're moving like this, and this as you breathe, as you inhale and exhale. And then that heart pump, the heart pump aspect inside the lungs, surrounded by fascia. Boom, boom, boom. It's not a pump, it's not mechanical. It's emotional, psychosomatic related. Every heartbeat changes and is different. So it's this muscle that's spiraled on itself like a really complex Mobius strip, and is somehow, like, you can actually unfold the heart. You can unfold the heart and have like this strip of muscle because it's like, right? So GILL was talking about the heart as the thing that ties together all things, which is something that I've been thinking a lot. That the mind is the knife of the anatomist, and the heart is the heart of Rumi, right? So I'm thinking about the heart, that single muscle that's like wrapping around the blood, wrapping it into a present, and then and the blood itself is part of the heart. The blood itself is flowing to all the parts of my body. The blood vessels themselves, even at the microscopic levels, are free to move and flow. So I'm watching different geometric patterns in my body, feeling the heart, feeling the lungs, feeling them fill the insides of the rib cage and slide easily and effortlessly. And starting this motion from the organs and the fluid flow, feeling into the tailbone. Feeling the tight spots. So I feel tight spot down here and back over here, and just finding fluid flow. Not stretching it, but soften flowing it. I had a conversation today on Facebook with a guy who told me a new word that isn't stretching. It's like the moving stretch that animals do. It's not like the stretch hold that lots of yoga classes do. And I think it's the thing Mo Farah does when he stretches. He just kind of moves, moves, moves. He's awakening muscles, helping them flow. Not just muscles, right? Clearly fascia connective tissue. He's not holding static, just letting everything move, move, move. This is one of the fastest runners in the world. Let it move, move, move. So I got a little march thing going here. Just feeling my pelvis rock. I'm letting the fluid rock just happen. I'm letting the fluid rock continue to my body. Feeling some of the, like, kind of maybe sticky parts of my shoulders. Trying to induce or introduce that feeling of fluid motion. I feel that it asks for a lot of trust in our own body, and also it is that sense of fluid connection which somehow engenders trust, literally, in our own body. So tuning back into the lungs, imagining, like, look online at someone inflating lungs. They're beautiful. And to see the slide of the lobes and the slide against the ribs. So I'm imagining that. I'm imagining it filling the back. It doesn't connect in back, but it almost connects in front. Lobes of lungs sliding against the heart. I mean, it's not, there's not space here, right? It's like moving, it's dancing. Breathing and blood flow connected. Feeling my neck, where I tend to hold a lot of tension, softening, finding the soften if I can. It feels hard to access right now. So I feel the earth. Say, don't worry about it, Jonathan. I'm in love, I'm in love, I'm in love. Soften into the ground. Relax my body. Let it feel its support. Bonnie says support precedes movement. I take that to mean insofar as I feel my support, as I kinesthetically relate to the ground, which probably has something that's measurable. I bet it does. I don't think we can measure it yet, but I bet one day we'll be able to measure groundedness. I shouldn't even call that into being, but, like, I don't know, it might happen. So I propose that through feeling the earth, it's really the only way we can find movement that is soft and relaxed. Because we have to be able to trust the ground where we stand. Not in an intellectual sense, I mean that too, but in a felt sense. And I think this really gets down to what and how this fluid system is working. That the fluid is sending fluid against itself. Have you seen Moana? When the ocean takes form and comes alive? I think humans are very much like that. Like, it's like these fluids. Like, we never see fluids move like that, but maybe we do. Noticing the places that feel tight on my heart, I start to feel softening into the rib connections, feeling the heart as I'm feeling it moving against the anterior aspects of the bodies of the thoracic vertebrae. Feeling the ribs pump and move, the inhalation and exhalation of the lungs. And I find this rhythm between it all. Change the movement a little bit. Find my pelvis again. Just rocking, rocking, rocking. Feeling my feet. I'm feeling my low legs. This is something I often don't feel, but the space between my fibula, it's the outer thin bone of my lower leg, and the shin bone, the tibia. There's space, and they're connected by connective tissue, which is sliding and moving. And so imagining that, like, the center of my leg is actually empty, just like the center of my forearm. Not empty, but it doesn't have bone, right? There's all this moving, fluid connective tissue. So what does it take to just feel that fluid nature in my body, right? That's what I'm exploring. Softening into my thighs. Looking for that psoas, iliacus. still stuck on that. Iliacus connection. Ooh, the iliacus. Iliacus? I swear I'm saying the wrong name, but I swear I'm not at the same time. I don't feel like looking it up. That muscle. That one. That one. Connects to psoas. Okay, I'm going to add some rotation. We're often really obsessed with like this planar movement. Something Frey Faust talks a lot about. He really looks for the spiralic motions and how we create forces, receive forces in different ways. I'm just kind of softening the legs, just letting them kind of go to the rhythm of the song. Feeling the bones of the foot, how they spring. Ooh. Notice I'm holding my low back. You probably noticed even I feel like I can look at the camera all of a sudden because I feel like I'm finding the support of my low back. This has been an exploration with me for a few days now. Really inhabiting L5, L4 in a new way. Still pulling out of that L5. Add this spiralic motion of the muscle and the thigh, you can feel it. So I'm just shaking it as I bounce, looking for looseness and fluidity. I'm feeling for that space between the fibula and the tibia as I roll my ankle. Feel again for that space. Feel for the space between the tibia, fibula, and the talus. Liquids, fluids flowing, all the bones in the foot, all the way out to the toes. Like, see how many joints you have in your fingers? You have the same amount in your toes. Like, a lot of joints. Feeling into the other side. Now I'm feeling the tibia and fibula. This one feels a little tighter. This one just feels softer in its bounce. So I'm feeling into that fibula, space between the tibia. That leg again, roll the ankle. Bounce it out. Feeling that fluid in the knee and the connective tissue all around my legs, surrounding my muscle fibers. And the thigh. Feeling L5, L4, L3, L2, L1, T12, right? Psoas, nerve roots, lumbar plexus inside the psoas. It's like in there. Into the iliacus, down in the femur. right? It's not like attachment. It's not like that. It's like they grow. They're growing. Connected. Feeling the pelvic floor. Connective tissue all around the abs, into the pelvis. Just keep listening to this song. This is what I do a lot of times. Softening into the butt, pelvic floor, back muscles, abdominal muscles, neck muscles. Tracing down, feeling the hands now, right? Just like I was feeling the feet. Peter's gonna die. I don't have enough time, I think. Save a little bit. So I'm feeling the joints of my fingers into the raise of my hand, bones of my wrist. Forearm bones, the space, right? It's twisting and these bones are rolling around one another, rolling in space. It's like, just trace where your thumb goes and you can see where this bone goes. Boom. Trace where your pinky goes, you can see where that bone goes. Twists. Feel my shoulder blades, collarbone. Tracing back into the heart, the lungs. Can I feel the smoothness of my lungs breathing? Lobe against lobe. Against the layers of fascia, against the ribs. And then feel that as connected to the shoulder blades. Trapezius, rhomboids, levator scapulae, all these different muscles, scalenes even. The collarbones. The collarbones relate to the heart and lungs. Right here is L1 in acupuncture, right in the, just below the collarbone. I started really feeling that when I said that. Like that was just freeing and releasing my lungs. So how do my collarbones relate to my lungs? Feeling muscles all around my face and jaw, which for me I so identify with. I so identify with the muscles in my face, right? As though to change these were to change the structure of my being or my reality. But they're just my muscles, right? In another sense, I'm gonna feel collarbone, root back into the collarbone and the lungs. I'm going to soften. I'm going to move really gently, or I start kind of feeling stress in my neck and head. And I feel like the face muscles just start moving as a unit. But can I feel differentiation in those fatty fascial layers sliding in my face? Right? Sliding in my face, into my skull. The muscles of my eyeball. Back into my sphenoid inside, right around the brain, but just focusing again on the face, my jaw, all around my beard, right underneath the vocal cords, the muscles in my neck in the front here. I'm trying not to get kind of stuck in the Feeling in the back of my head, but really feel the rocking in my face, my cheeks, the inside of my cheeks, my lips, and my tongue. The roof of the bottom of my mouth. The tongue is growing in right to the bottom, at least. Connecting back and down, the top of the roof. Connect up into the sinuses. Right. Those pathways, I just breathe through my nose and feel those pathways. Imagine that air radiating, like creating a resonance. What does that resonance do? How does the air spin inside your nose? Past the channels and the hair and the passageways, right? Like it's this spiraling thing. It's like a river that's just eddying, moving. Softening the face. Feeling the muscles of the face soften as I feel the passageways of the nose. The resonance of the air. And the crown of the head. Movement between the bones of the skull. Gotta move slower. Not losing my face muscles. I remember being in a meditation retreat once and I felt all my face muscles relax. And they just felt like they dropped like an inch. It was the strangest thing. And I've since like come back into this more like socialized thing where they like are up, right? But I felt it and I was just, it was amazing. The photo I've seen that's the closest thing to that is that there's a specific photo of O-sensei, of Aikido, Morihei Ueshiba. It's like signed and it's a white background. And I met a guy, Barish Sensei, in Washington, I think. What's his name? He had the original. It's cool, with that photo. That's amazing. In that photo, Ueshiba's face looks like he's just like dropped and like settled everything, and he looks very austere and serious and full of like gravitas. I kind of remember back to what that felt like. And I feel the muscles in my face. And I feel how there's like an embarrassment that arises to let them move in different ways. That they're so trained by the society around me